I'm joined now by the ranking member of the Senate Intelligence Committee, Senator Mark Warner. Senator, thanks for joining me.
Brian, thanks again for having me.
So we've had a lot of news pop up about this whistleblower complaint as it relates to Tulsi Gabbard, who was apparently present while the FBI was executing a search warrant in Fulton County to take the 2020 ballots. So first and foremost, what's being done to figure out what this whistleblower complaint that's apparently being suppressed actually says?
Well, remember, Tulsi Gabbard swore under oath that she would observe the rules about whistleblower complaints when she was up for confirmation. This whistleblower complaint, which I've not seen yet, I will see shortly, was actually brought to the department, I believe, in June. Now, if you follow the rules and this whistleblower wanted the complaint reported to Congress, there's like a 21-day processing period. So they should have reported the complaint. Well, I'll give them even the benefit of the doubt by the end of July.
Yeah.
We didn't even know there was a whistleblower complaint until November. And then it's taken literally the bipartisan gang of 8 to say, what the hell, send it to us. And we're just getting it now. I've heard rumors about the subject matter. Once I see it, I won't be able to talk about it, the content. But it's, even if the whistleblower complaint is not hair on fire, it does mean that this obligation she has, this is not just some maybe I should, maybe I would. No, this is the freaking law. She should have reported it to Congress within 21 days. And then once we did discover it, the fact that it still took almost 2.5, 3 months of negotiation. And remember, she's not just dissing me or Hakeem Jeffries. She's dissing Mike Johnson and John Thune and all the appropriate authorities. So it's, again, the litany on Tulsi Gabbard and her ineptness for this job goes on and on.
So I have a bunch of questions here. First is, are we certain that the whistleblower complaint is regarding Tulsi Gabbard?
I do not know.
The next question is there a chain of custody that shows who's at fault for suppressing this whistleblower complaint that was supposed to be transmitted to you this summer?
Well, we got some, letter when the whole gang of 8 was putting pressure, that somehow she didn't know she had to do this. Well, that's why you have a lawyer. That's why you also, when you testify and say, Senate, please confirm me, I'm going to follow the law, and then she chooses not to, there ought to be consequences. So, we'll see whether my Republican colleagues are going to do anything or whether they'll just say, it took longer than it should, but we're not going to hold her accountable. The fact that it took all 8 of us almost 3 months within the gang of 8 to kind of get it, I would hope they would be, just on plain process grounds, pretty pissed off too.
The next question I have is, we have seen Tulsi Gabbard kind of come into the news because, again, as I mentioned at the top, she's now involved in this whole effort to get those ballots that were used in the 2020 election. Anybody who's watched politics over the last, 5 years, 6 years knows that the only reason Trump is interested in getting these ballots is he wants somebody, some stooge to be able to come out and say, you're right, President Trump, there was fraud in the election. There was some subversive, nefarious activity in the election. That will give him a pretext to be able to say, there was fraud, just like I thought in 2020. That means in 2026 or 2028, we have to really hunker down in a way that we didn't do before. And I should be able to oversee the elections. We should have Republicans in charge. We should be able to seize the voting machines. We should have access to the ballots. We should gain visibility into the voter rolls, all this stuff. Like, this is Trump's fever dream. Tulsi Gabbard's involvement in this seems to me, and I'm curious what your thoughts are on this, because as DNI, she should only be able to have kind of her area of focus should just be foreign interference in elections. If she can come forward and say, you know what, I've done my research, and we have Italy and Switzerland and China and Venezuela who conspired with Joe Biden's FBI and CIA, and I, as DNI, can confirm there was foreign interference in the election, and then of course that would give Trump the pretext that I was talking about to be able to go ahead and meddle in the next election. Is there some concern that that's what Tulsi Gabbard's job is in all of this?
Well, you've laid it out pretty well. I mean, let's look at this. The National Security Act, which set up this whole notion of how we have oversight of national security, happened because Nixon and Watergate. And so that was what the creation of the intelligence committees were, to do the oversight. And we made very clear in that one, our spying agencies are only supposed to look outside the country. They're not supposed to spy on Americans. The FBI, in terms of criminal stuff, is supposed to deal with that. So Tulsi Gabbard has no jurisdiction on a domestic criminal investigation. She didn't even tell the FBI she was coming. What in the hell she was doing there, other than potentially trying to curry favor with Trump, I don't think there's any legitimate answer, and she has yet to give any fulsome. If she says, okay, now all of a sudden, 6 years after the fact, lo and behold, I found all this foreign interference. Well, I read my intelligence briefs pretty damn well. And if there was any evidence of even hints of this, we would have heard about it within the normal intelligence channels. Or if she's been cooking up this theory and then doesn't report it to the intelligence committees, which are her oversight committees, she's breaking the law again there too. She said she would timely report to her committees on oversight. So this is, it is wacky. I mean, a year ago, and I was maybe slow because I didn't think that Trump a year ago would be this outrageous. When people said 26, 28, are you concerned about the security of the elections? I said a possibility, but I wasn't as concerned. The last 6 months and the last couple of weeks, my concern level is really, really shot up, coming on top of the outrageous activity in Minneapolis, or the potential of using ICE patrols to show up around polling stations. And then Gabbard's, beyond kind of the belief performance, and then put all on top of that, and you don't have to speculate now, Donald Trump's own words that somehow say, oh yeah, Republicans should run the election, should nationalize elections. That is against the Constitution. And every Republican state, when we tried to put in the first level of security for our elections after the 2016 election, and remember, this was Trump won, anytime there was efforts to even, like, for example, share cybersecurity standards with state local elections, they said, oh, we're not sure we want that because that could be federal intervention. So I know we live in the down the rabbit hole Alice in Wonderland, but up is down and down is up, where Trump is now calling for federalization and Republicans can taking control of the elections. And Gabbard, as his kind of protege in this, again, if you're not worried, you should be.
In terms of the fact that this whistleblower complaint exists, I think you and I could both agree that if the shoe is on the other foot and there was some Biden administration official for whom a whistleblower complaint was lodged against them and it was just sitting there and it wasn't being transmitted to Congress, this would be like the national outrage. Fox News would be talking about it 24/7. There would already be hearings about the fact that there should be a hearing about what the whistleblower complaint itself says. And so my concern here is that enough isn't being done, given the fact that not just process, because I don't think that people really care about process. And in fact, I think that our collective adherence to focusing on process above all else has been a little bit of our downfall. But just the fact that this exists and the administration is allowed to police itself to the point where even legitimate whistleblower complaints about themselves are being suppressed, kind of in the same vein as how shootings done by DHS are being investigated by DHS. I mean, this should be a much bigger story. What is the plan among you and your Senate colleagues to get this thing out front and center, given the fact that, this is a really significant issue, and if again the shoe is on the other foot, it's all we'd be hearing about.
Right. Amen. They would be completely, their heads would be exploding. I think this is my 8th or 9th press hit today on this. I did a big press conference trying to get this out into the bloodstream. But remember, we still have the DHS ICE hearings. The government just got funded. I will give Thune at least a margin of credit that he said today, well, we don't think we can nationalize elections. But this is where, if we can't get Americans upset, if we can't force our Republicans to find a spine, we can hold what we call a shadow hearing, but it won't even get picked up by influencers. So,
well, I mean, look, if you host a shadow hearing, I'm telling you right now, I'll cover it, and I'll reach out to other folks in the ecosystem.
We will see if we. I am still. We know we're going to get Gabbard in front of our committee.
Will that be public? Will that be public or private?
That will be public, right? And Unfortunately, it's not until next month. It's not until the beginning of March, but we will have her. We are going to do election security hearings in the Intelligence Committee. I'm still working with Cotton on how we get it done. And I'm concerned, frankly, not only because of what they could do in the fall or what they could do in the primaries, but we'll probably have a statewide voter referendum on redistricting in Virginia in April. So Virginia could be let's try our new techniques here.
Yeah.
So we are going to bang the drum. We are going to get folks as upset as possible. I mean, the challenge, though, for example, when all of the awful stuff it was happening in Minneapolis, it was it's awful, but it's true. Until Ms. Good and then Mr. Pretty were brutally killed, we didn't get the Republicans to the floor or to the table on ICE reforms, even though there was a lot of bad stuff happening beforehand. And I am wide open for you or any of your viewers on what else we should do, because you're right. If it sounds like all process and when you're supposed to report a whistleblower, when not, I mean, that I think you can get lost in. I think the thing when President Trump says he wants to nationalize and have Republicans take over elections, and when you've got a director of national intelligence not even telling initially the FBI that she was coming and showing up way outside her lane, people ought to get pissed.
Right.
I'm pissed.
Well, I look forward to hearing more about that on the issue of ICE funding itself, because now this is, gone. This bill to keep the government, to reopen the government will obviously get signed, but that includes a 2-week continuing resolution just for DHS funding. There seems to be a little bit of an impasse in terms of what the Democrats are asking for and the Republicans' willingness to accept that stuff, which includes in part masks for ICE agents or cameras for ICE agents. Can you give us, I think first and foremost, I have to ask, there are a lot of people who don't have faith that even when Democrats put down their red line issues, that the Democrats are going to abide by it. And we've seen other instances in the past where Democrats have caved, even though they had imposed their red lines, like with ACA funding, for example. So is there a commitment that you can give that on certain issues, that DHS funding won't be given unless those demands are met?
I'm not going to vote for any additional ICE funding unless we get some reforms. It's as simple as that. But I also would just ask, for some folks to realize, and again, I come from Virginia. We got a lot of federal workers. When you shut down the federal government, who are you really hurting? You're hurting federal workers.
Yeah.
Who may or may not get paid at the end of the day. And the thing that completely makes me a little crazy when I hear from some of my colleagues, well, let's shut it down, shut it down, shut it down. The very same folks who are being discriminated against in Minneapolis and elsewhere on these ICE raids are often the people who are the contractors, because the people who clean our federal buildings, the toilets, the people who do a lot of the jobs that used to be federal employees, they're all contractor jobs now. So you put that person out of work for a month and a month and a half, they get no reimbursement. And I just hope as we think about, all of our threats, and listen, I stuck all the way through on the healthcare fight. I thought healthcare was important enough, but there is sometimes a cavalier attitude about, well, shutting down the government, that's not gonna harm folks, or it's not gonna bring a burden. When frankly, federal workers are disproportionately, especially after DOJ, on our side. So we're gonna stick to it. And do I think that Republicans are gonna give on everything? I'm not counting on it. And I think we have to keep the pressure on. But again, I go back to, we shut down DHS, let's have it. But God forbid we have a challenge at the airport when TSA agents aren't being paid, and folks that are air traffic controllers and others. I mean, we gotta push with all we can. And again, this is why I get the big bucks, because you gotta weigh these challenges. But it's not. There are people at the other end of a federal government shutdown that I just would ask everybody to think about. And they are, generally speaking, disproportionately who support our point of view and want these reforms. But yeah, and that's why one of the reasons why we all realized it was going to take a couple of weeks. That's why, thank God, the other 95% of the government is going to be open. So we're not holding, the Republicans were holding the rest of the government hostage. And the fact that we got that open, I think I'd call that a win, since we can now fight this battle entirely inside the DHS, entirely on the ICE issue, which I think is, again, a smarter thing for us both politically and for the numbers of people that will be affected if we go back into even a partial shutdown.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think it is smart just to focus this narrowly on what's happening at DHS. And I hear you on the fact that there are going to be people who are hurt, but the reality is there are people that are going to be hurt regardless. Like if DHS has no guardrails, who's to say that there won't be another shooting, another Renee Good, another Alex Preddy tomorrow? And so, again, to your point, and you alluded to this. This is the give and take. There is no silver bullet. There's no formula that's going to work perfectly for everybody. Somebody's going to get hurt, and unfortunately, that's the situation that Republicans have put everybody in by trying to fund an agency that is completely lawless, and then putting all of their weight behind getting no conditions behind DHS funding.
And that's again where, and I think people get this in their gut, and I don't want to get down in the weeds again, but there are so many freaking things that have blown past any kind of norm, any kind of law. I mean, if we just talked about the President of the United States saying we ought to nationalize elections, that in itself would be a week-long story of old traditional front page. If we simply talked about the Director of National Intelligence somehow interfering in domestic criminal investigations, that would blow people's minds. If we thought about, obviously we were focused on the awful things that have happened in Minneapolis and elsewhere. When you focus on the fact that in my state, 75 to 80% of the people who've been picked up on the ICE raids have committed no criminal infraction. So there is this theory of they keep throwing crap at the wall.
Yeah.
And, again, I'm not complaining. I'm asking folks to hire me again. So it's part of the job, but it is a little overwhelming. And I fear that people become almost numb to it.
Yeah.
And when all of this behavior becomes, quasi-rationalized, that ain't good for the country. That ain't good for, legitimate political discourse or legitimate political rule, regardless of what happens going forward.
Yeah, look, and I do think the onus is on those of us in the pro-democracy ecosystem to make sure not to normalize any of this behavior and to push back when there are whistleblower complaints against the DNI, when there are efforts by the president to nationalize elections or put Republicans unilaterally in control of elections. And, that's the work that I do. It's the work that you do. And it's difficult when you are contending with an opponent whose goal is to flood the zone with shit. But I think, like you said, that's the hard work that needs to be done. So,
well, one of the things I would ask, Brian, of you and everybody in the pro-democracy, and I'm pretty close with some of the folks, some more on the legal end, but, we need to have an organized timeline, even if this fades from the news for a week. What are the key times that we got to make sure they're not pulling any more funny business through this whole process period? In Virginia, that'll be, if there is an April referendum, it won't be on April 21st, the referendum day, I think they've said, but it'll be weeks before on the primaries. We've got to make sure we don't, because I'm not fearful now that they may go to subterfuge, they may try to, and this is again goes back to why the whistleblowers have to be respected. They got to have a due process, even if their claim is not valid, but they got to still have a process.
Yeah.
And part of my job is to make sure that the rhythm of the election, they don't screw things up even more. And the truth is, a lot of the situations that were set up actually were set up in the first Trump administration after the Russian intervention. So the FBI Center on Election Interference, that's been shut down. The Director of National Intelligence, Foreign Malign Influence Center, that's by law. She shut that down. Cybersecurity, the CISA agency, a third plus of the folks who are trying to give local election officials the tools they need to make their election systems more secure. That's been cut. So it's and that's again the part where if this was the shoe was on the other foot, and I know we can, this is
a tired game.
Yeah. We got to just keep fighting like hell.
We'll leave it there. Senator Warner, thanks so much for taking the time.
Thank you so much.